this is something I did want to get out there, talk about and get out there and get people's attention on, because everything I've looked at over the years, and this is regarding Zechariah Sitchin and his translation of the Sumerian texts and other texts that deal with the Anunnaki, and that they all seem to hit on, and I don't care if it's, and it's no, it's not putting anyone down by any means, but whether it's Ancient Aliens TV show or different books or videos, whatever, they all seem to talk about, okay, the Anunnaki created man. They altered the DNA of one of the,
Hominids.
I'm sorry?
One of the hominids.
One of the hominids that existed on Earth at that time to make Homo sapiens. And thus they created man. And so it seems to be negating that, oh, they're saying, well, we're saying there's no God. If you believe that, you're saying there's no God.
Well,
and then
I think what a lot of them do, like you watch Ancient Aliens and all these people, is the terminology they use a lot is, well, the gods came from the heavens and
Right.
created man. And that's what they say. And maybe a lot of the interpretations of the clay tablets are written that way because the context of those Homo sapiens, like these were essentially gods to them because they did come from the stars.
Sure.
But they are not, but to...
Well, what it doesn't point out, what they lose is, or again, they seem to be, what gets interpreted in these pieces is that the Anunnaki are who we're saying created humans, therefore there is no God. And as we think of God normally when you say it, but the Anunnaki themselves believed in a creator of everything, and they did not view themselves as gods. They had a strong belief in a higher power. And while to them they were solving a practical problem that they had, needing labor in the mines, etc., and not having enough Anunnaki on individuals on this planet to do the production, and don't need to get into that kind of detail, but this was a practical solution that they came up with. Later, they realized that this had been part of the divine destiny, that they serendipitously fell into and did something right here. And they also, when they talked about them bringing about the flood to destroy all man, and one of the leaders, Inlay, was going to wipe out all of mankind with the flood and let them die, because the Anunnaki had basically lost their purity by inbreeding with Homo sapiens that they created, with using their own DNA as well. And yet this creator of all things that they believed in, apparently, or it was reported, sent an emissary to show one of the Anunnaki how to save mankind and from the flood, so all would not be destroyed. And
who sent the emissary?
The creator of everything.
Okay.
And they seem to have a delineation between, they could control fates, they could shape fates and how things became fated to some individuals and circumstances. I'll get into that for a second. But then there was destiny. Destiny was what the creator of all things had determined. And that you couldn't change. That, again, all-powerful creator of all things, you could not go against the creator of all things.
You have the ability to change your fate, but not your destiny.
Right. And that goes actually along the lines of the teachings that, so much of us, so many of us have follow or think about, is that our decisions that we make and what we think about on a daily basis determines our fate and the directions we're going in our life. And so, not so much different, just worded a little differently, using the word fate to say the decisions you're making, my friend, are determining what's going to happen with the rest of your life. But that which is destined is destined.
There's like a 4-tiered path of the philosophy or concept of life in ancient Japanese Tao thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and there it does, and it I'm trying to remember all 4 of them, but it does it does have 2 of the 4. One of them is fate, which you can control, and destiny, which you can't. That comes from Creator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and this is what's left out of all the things I seem to see that are put out there about the Anunnaki, is that they did have respect for, worshipped, honored a higher power. That they did not look at themselves as the higher power. But so much of the material out there seems to indicate that they consider themselves gods and the creators of man, and therefore they were, who, should be worshiping or whatever. And the Anunnaki recognize their superiority in technology and other physically themselves, etc. But they did not see themselves as the God of all things, the creator of all things, the superior, higher being. That's not how they perceive themselves at all. And they, even Enlil, who is going to destroy all of mankind, let them be destroyed after the destruction. And he realized that Inke had actually tricked him, and figuring out a way, being guided by the emissary that had been sent by the creator of all things to him, had allowed humans to survive. He realized that this was part of the divine destiny that the creator of all things had intended. And in the Bible, it's fairly clear in a number of places that God considers whatever his prophets do is the same as him doing it. Whatever Jesus did was the same as him doing it. Whatever the believers in him do is the same as him doing it. The Anunnaki, and modifying the DNA, is just doing the will of the creator of all things. And it's the same as him doing it. He did it. He just used the hands, if you will, of these individuals we call Anunnaki to physically do it. And he brought this about. So what's the difference? He did create. The creator of all things did create man. He just used the Anunnaki to do it.
Yeah.
And if it was not part of the destiny that was designed by the creator of all things, the Anunnaki never would have done it. So anyway, that's just the fact that the Anunnaki believed in a higher power. They believed that that higher power had destiny in this universe to be fulfilled, and that they, in some small way, from their perspective, could fulfill certain destinies of the higher power, and is usually left out of all of the material that is presented about the Anunnaki. And that's one of the things I want to get out there, is that they don't consider themselves the God of the creator of everything. They're not replacing or supplanting the Yahweh, or who we look at as the creator of everything. That's kind of that basic point.
That's amazing to me because I mean, as you know, and people watching this that may not know, but like much like yourself, and I'm sure a lot of people out there, probably people that would be interested in watching this, that I've read a lot and watched a lot of videos and listened to a lot of lectures about the Anunnaki, and you are right. I've never heard anyone talk about the spiritual beliefs or the religious beliefs or the religious knowing. For example, if some of the Anunnaki, like you said, encountered their own prophet of creator, like similar to Jesus, that told them that this was divine destiny, them creating Homo sapiens on Earth. Nobody has. I've never heard anyone talk about that. I've never heard anyone write about that. And I think you are right about getting it out there because it does, I think, limit people's perceptions when they even feel open-minded enough to embrace these concepts or teachings or knowledge, because you have people talking about Zechariah Sitchin's writing or the Book of Enoch and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and all of these references talk about the Anunnaki being gods who descended from heaven. And yes, to Homo sapiens whom they created, maybe it seems like godlike powers. When science is advanced enough, it always almost seems like magic. Mm-hmm. But a lot of whether the author or narrator, I don't know if they have the explicit intention of telling you that there is no God, that it's just the Anunnaki, or whether that's not actually the message they're trying to convey, but it just gets lost in translation because they don't articulate what you did. But it does give a lot of people interested in this subject the impression that we don't need to now even think about Yahweh, the creator of everything, Wakantanka, being in the equation, because it's just the Anunnaki, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, and it leaves you, a lot of the materials, I think, leaves the reader or the watcher thinking that, well, then what you're saying is it's all just evolution through the whole universe, just evolved on its own with no grand design or anything else, with no God of everything, with no creator of everything. And no, that's not what Zechariah Sitchin interpreted from the tablets. And one thing I like about Sitchin's work is that what a brilliant individual this guy was, but he wanted to translate from the original script. So he was not diluting the message of the original script. So, and let's translate it directly from the Sumerian instead of from the Sumerian to the Greek to the English. Even one step. There were flavors, if you will, that would change in the understanding. And but so this. And I think the reason why it's important to me is I think a lot of people that could gain from reading these materials and knowing about the Anunnaki don't, because they think, oh, this is evil, this is bad, because they're saying there's no God. That's not what they're saying at all. But that's, like you say, whether the authors or whether the people that are presenting this are trying to move people on that path, or they just are so focused on, this is amazing, here's evidence that we were manufactured, so to speak.
And I can't understand that. I can't understand how their motivation is, no, I just want to get the knowledge and the message out that we're engineered by another race of beings, and that is a profound message that I commend them on sharing. Yeah. But yeah, I think that for people that might be more conventionally religious, but maybe open-minded enough to embrace these historic ancient texts and writings about the Anunnaki creating us, maybe they, like you said, they say, oh, well, this is just trying to say that there is no God, and then on the opposite side, you have a lot of maybe atheistic-minded individuals who are like, oh, see, there is no God, it's just the Anunnaki.
Right.
And it's like, no, just like I think one of the biggest problems with Western modern society is that, and I mean this on every level of our society, our civilization, from the most mundane to the most profound philosophic and spiritual concepts, is we tend to isolate and compartmentalize everything. And we do it with modern medicine where, somebody has this affliction and they only try and do palliative care on that one affliction. And it's as opposed to more holistic medicine, which tries to look at all these other aspects of your life in relation to that one ailment. Or we do the same thing in a community or a society. We say, well, we've got a homelessness or a mental health issue or an autism issue. Well, let's look at that one thing. It's like, well, what's going on in the entire society that's causing that? And so, here we are again with, in context, a piece of teaching that comes from a lot of archaeological black and white evidence of these ancient Sumerian tablets, which when translated say that very clearly, a lot of very articulate evidence saying that human beings were created by Anunnaki, or compartmentalizing that piece of historic data and saying, oh, well, there is no God now, we were just created by aliens. It's like, no, that's not what it says at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is writing about what the Anunnaki themselves believed.
Right.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that's an interesting little segue to something we were talking about earlier to that point, because I think I think you got everything you needed to on that piece. Is talking about the divinity of the universe, the creator of everything, and how the Anunnaki believed in him, but also and talking about all of these different races of aliens that may be visiting us or alien visitation. The concept that a lot of people don't talk about what the religious or spiritual beliefs of all of those
that they have them in the first place, and that's actually where I was going. My next comment. So we're in track, but starting with, since we're talking about the Anunnaki, but starting with the Anunnaki, the fact that they had a religion, and to kind of segue a little bit to the side, or do a little cute angle over here, they also eventually set up the priesthoods and the rituals for the humans. And why? Because they recognized, because the humans had evolved through the genetic engineering that was done by the Anunnaki, their perception of spiritual realms had advanced. And this gave them the tools to interact with those realms, much like the Anunnakis did in their own religion. And so, again, the very little of what Sitchin writes about goes into detail about their religion, but the fact that they did have one, and they did have those guidelines that religion brought about, to have civilization, there are certain conditions that must exist, and an agreement of what is acceptable behavior, what is not acceptable behavior, lying, cheating, stealing, murder, whatever, what we call the Ten Commandments, was apparently very much part of their teachings. And some of what this can get off into another subject, but some of what they did with humans, from the mating with humans to even the designing of humans, broke some of their own religious laws. Yet they later look at this was divinely guided by the creator of all things to help this evolve, to create the humans and our culture, society, etc., that so much of it comes directly out of that time period with Sumerians. And so they did not view themselves as perfect beings at all. And then you start looking at exactly, well, what else is not talked about is that the aliens that are visiting us, do they have a religion? Do they have a belief in God, the creator of all things? And yes, they very much do. And you start looking at some of the interactions of the meetings of the third, fourth kind, and they do let it be known and be seen that they do have, let's say, guidelines, spiritual guidelines that they follow, even in regards to their interactions with humans and their purposes here. And some are very open that they are here to help the spiritual development of humans, as well as the material and technological development. Some are not so interested, but what they all have to do is honor our spiritual beliefs. Even if they think they're not as developed as theirs, they still, ours is, it's kind of like if we were to go somewhere and discover a primitive tribe, whatever their spiritual beliefs are, you honor it because it's what they guide their lives by. It may not be yours, but y'all may want to have an exchange, but you simply don't ignore it. And the aliens, like there's several examples I've had with dealing with graves, etc., that by calling, for me, it's Jesus Christ, calling upon the name of Jesus, that they have to stop and pay attention to what I'm telling them to do or not do, because they're honoring my beliefs. And that's some personal experience, but also, that I became aware I could do because I became aware that, they believe in a divine creator of all things, God, and that they have a religion that they follow. Now, there's some films out there of interviews with graves and all that. They're basically denying that they have, that God is not real or whatever. I think that those films were, my personal opinion, they may be faked and may not be, but that's that individual. Just like if you were speaking to a human atheist and interviewing that human atheists, they would deny the existence of God. That doesn't mean that all humans believe the same thing. Doesn't mean that all graves believe the same thing.
Or the other species.
Or the other species.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but there is a very strong what's a good way of putting it? For many of the species that are involved with Earth, that are not of this planet, they feel there's a divine purpose for them being here and guiding us to evolve spiritually, not just technology-wise. And just the fact that they do have a spiritual beliefs that they follow is never discussed, and it needs to be addressed. And if somebody has an interaction with an alien, I would urge them to bring this topic up. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but no, I'm being abducted. I mean, well, wait a minute, what do y'all think about God? Well, why not? And they will talk. They will communicate about it.
It is very interesting. I think you're right. I've watched a lot of interviews. I think of very, very credible interviews of people that have had close encounters of the third kind, which is actual contact with beings.
Right.
And specifically those very credible cases in which it's a mass encounter of the third kind, like the school outside of the school in the 90s in South Africa.
Yes.
And then there's another incident in China, and then a third, I believe, in the outside of a forest in Germany, outside of a military base, where these U.S. servicemen had an encounter. And in all three of those situations, there's and more. There's telepathic communication between the beings and humans, and where the beings are just kind of essentially the message is that we're harming the planet, but more importantly that we need to get away from the dangerous technology and that one of them in particular, I think it's the Varginha case in Brazil, where the telepathic message that one of the servicemen got from the alien was just that he feels that the alien felt really bad for us, and that the alien really desperately wanted us to realize who we are and what we are connected to, but that we don't. And I think that even though that's the telepathic message that the witnesses report on in their interviews, I think when discussing the topic we're discussing today, it's easy to see how all of those connect to a more spiritual, philosophical paradigm through which we as a species view ourselves and our place in the universe.
They really don't understand, many of them do not understand why we do not see the divinity within ourselves.
Yeah.
And some of them have much more awareness of that part of that spirit of the creator of all things is dwelling within us and is part of us. And they know that. They understand, they believe it, they follow it, they believe they're being guided in their interactions with Earth. Many of them do, not all, but and they just don't understand why we don't get it yet. But that's why they think they're here, is to help us to get it.
And that does make sense to me, even though there's a lot. I mean, it makes sense to me, like I've already said, in a lot of the witness testimony that have had telepathic interactions with these alien beings, because it's all kind of, that's pretty much the underlying message every time, which is, if you think about it, a message of kind of a divine spiritual evolution of how we view ourselves. And also it's really interesting because we can talk about all that when it comes to the witness testimony and time again, but how that never really translates to a topic of discussion that we're having now about what are the spiritual and religious beliefs of all of these species that are here trying to do whatever they're doing for us or with us. And then that brings up a good point that you and I talked about earlier this morning, where, kind of off topic, but to get off topic a minute to come back, is that just as humans, you and I have had many conversations where we know that we are spiritual beings in this physical form. We have an energy body, right, a spiritual body, and a physical body, and that all of these things, we're basically, and because we're beings that are spiritual beings but also physical beings, we actually have a tremendous amount of authority. And in a way, this is heaven. This is the Garden of Eden, being a human on the earth. I mean, so much consciousness in the universe would love to come and be human and be here for this amount of time that we get. And you and I have also discussed, when you're dealing with spirit, and we know, and this is a topic of a different conversation, but when as humans we find ourselves encountering a non-physical consciousness or a spiritual entity, that we need to realize as humans how much authority we have in dealing with that non-physical spiritual consciousness, whether it has our best interest at heart, or whether it is a little more nefarious or lower vibration. Because as beings that walk in both worlds, as physical beings and spiritual beings, we have the ability to say with our heart firmly, like, no, you're not allowed here, or you're not allowed to do this, or you're not allowed to do that. And that spirit that's trying to interact with us, good or bad, it has to honor those things, because we have that power as spiritual beings and physical beings. So with that concept in mind, going back to the topic, we were talking this morning about how these aliens that are here, they have the same belief. If you can get yourself there, they know that they are physical beings and spiritual beings, and they know that there's the divine in them that they so desperately want us as an entire species to wake up to, that so many of us don't know. I think that there's a good number of humans, like present company included. I think we do have a pretty good idea that we are divinity. You know, that we have the spark of God in us, and that we're all one and connected.
Right. We are
But
all children of God.
yes, and then to that point, you know, you were saying to me how, you know, and that's why they kind of need to listen, or if you ever find yourself having an encounter with an alien, or you can ask them these questions, or know that, you know, they have the same respect for our beliefs, or the same respect for the divinity, because just like as humans that know, just as like two humans who know that we are spiritual beings as well as physical beings, and we know that that spiritual being version of us, that higher self version of us, is a part of God and is God, so therefore we are all God or children of God. That's why you have Namaste, right? Which is, what is it, Sanskrit or Vedic for the divine in me sees the divine in you.
Right.
So therefore it's logical that they feel the same way. You know, the human and an alien today could be looking at each other and say the same thing. The divine in me sees the divine in you.
That's a good point. I'd like to expand on that in just a minute. In that you've heard the line of pearls before swine.
Yes.
And you do not cast pearls before swine, because swine, pigs, do not understand the value of pearls. They just eat them and go on about their way. They're nothing to them. And so Namaste is, like you say, see the divinity in you and the divinity in me. If I don't think you understand that you're not at a level where you are seeing the divinity in me. And you're not capable of it at that point. So I don't even bother saying it to you. Therefore, I treat you as somebody who is ignorant at best. And I'm not going to try to explain all this to you. I'm going to interact with you and get my job done, whatever my job might be. I don't know if I'm giving a clear example of this.
You are.
But and similarly, you're an architect by trade. Somebody comes to you and says, I want this building, and you design this building for them. And you tend to all of the practical things that are necessary to supply them what they're asking for. In most cases, I would imagine, unless it's a particular type of building that had some spiritual significance, your spiritual beliefs never come up. And they don't ask you, or nor do they necessarily volunteer, oh, I believe in a creator of all things. I believe in a supreme being. No, I'm here for architectural plans. Thank you very much. Well, aliens, whatever their purpose is, whether it's to create a hybrid race like some people believe some of the aliens are wanting to do, or for whatever, to just save us from ourselves, they don't necessarily need to bring up, oh yes, by the way, I believe in a supreme being, and I'd like to tell you about my spiritual beliefs that I live every day. Because no, I'm here to get my job done, or what my purpose here is. And you are freaking out because you're being abducted by an alien, and you're not stopping. Well, maybe I should discuss God with him. You know? But if you do, I can tell you that I think that's what broke a cycle of abductions for me, is me telling them that they could not do so any longer in the name of Jesus Christ, and by that authority and power, it had to end. And that's just my experience, and maybe they were just happened to be through with me anyway, you know. But you know, my experience was that would continue, but they had to honor what they knew was the divine part in me addressing them and stopping that process. And so, at any rate, the key note here is that not only what what most people are not hearing about is not only that the Anunnaki did not view themselves as supreme God. They believed in a supreme creator of everything that created the destiny of this whole universe. But all of the aliens that are interacting on this planet also have what we would refer to as religious and spiritual beliefs that they adhere to, some extremely strongly. And they are here for what they believe is their divine purpose. And this is just not discussed in most of the material that's out there that people see every day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the purpose of the conversation.
It's just amazing stuff. And it's been such an interesting conversation this morning with you about these topics, which, again, even though I watch a lot of interviews and narrations, read a lot about the Sumerian clay tablets and clay rounds and the interpretations of Zechariah Sitchin, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and the Book of Enoch, and all of these things, you just don't hear this talked about. So it's really, really great perspective, I think.
And, again, on the interpretations, as you kind of indicated earlier, humans that are doing the writings here, what are they going to use? As far as these beings with the advanced technology, they're basically gods.
Yeah.
But they're not. But their meaning of gods versus what the meaning of when we say God, the supreme being, is two different things.
Well, it's just like, and I know this is an example that's talked about in ancient. This is an example that's talked about in History Channel's Ancient Aliens and a lot of other people, but it's a great example to the specific point we're making today. Is that there's that islander culture in the Pacific of this very old world indigenous tribe, and they're what's the word I'm looking for here? They're still undeveloped. It's a completely undeveloped tribe, and they've been totally isolated from the modern world. So they really know nothing of the modern world. All they know is they've been this isolated, undeveloped tribe on this small Pacific island. And then, like in World War II and post-World War II, and the United States started doing all these flyovers. It was the first time they've ever seen, not only have they not even really seen a ship, it's their first time seeing an airplane, and the airplane drops a lot of cargo, and the cargo has food and things for them. And so this culture starts worshiping the planes as gods, or they start worshiping Americans as gods. Because the Americans were flying in these machines that they couldn't even conceive,
and they build replicas of these machines,
exactly,
bamboo, etc.
And these flying machines were bringing gifts. So they started worshiping the planes and or Americans as gods. Now, that culture of humans, they're calling us Americans or these planes, they're calling them gods, and it's because they're bringing these benevolent gifts, and they're portraying and they're displaying technologies that seem like magic to them.
Right.
So that's why they're gods. But even if we wanted to interact with this culture more directly, and for lack of or for the ease of the relationship, we just go along with being called gods by them, and to facilitate kind of being more of a leader role for them. That essentially is the same context as the Anunnaki being called gods by the humans they created on Earth. But that doesn't mean, in the context of the Americans being the gods to these islanders, that we consider ourselves as Americans the supreme divine God creator in the universe.
Perfect analogy.
We still have our religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And the Anunnaki and all these other aliens do as well.
That is a perfect example, of exactly what is occurring here.
Yeah.
And if we help those islanders, the cargo cults begin to build better irrigation systems, better shelters, better. Again, this is similar to what the Anunnaki were doing with the humans and all, but it looks like the divine doing this, and it is in a way through.
It's the divine working through this
Through-
other race.
Exactly. Okay.
I remember now. And it was just it was a thought that I had in the moment while you were talking, and it was interesting to me about two things that you said today. One, that you said how even though the Anunnaki initially created the human race, created Homo sapiens through genetic engineering, really from a kind of utilitarian and very practical purpose of just needing a labor force.
Yeah.
But then after the fact, they kind of realized, partly through the creator sending an emissary or a prophet, that this was
Right.
actually good and part of the divine destiny that the creator had for the universe.
Yeah.
So, and then also how you said that, and another thing that you said today was how some of the aliens visiting Earth today in modern times, maybe the motivation of some of them is to create their own genetic hybrid of mankind with whatever race they are.
Right.
And the thought that those 2 points that you touched upon sparked was an interesting one, which is something I've heard other people talk about in interviews, like Billy Carlson, I think his name, or Billy Carson, and a couple other people, is they talk about when the Anunnaki first created humans, that it was, like you said, it was viewed as sacrilegious by some of them in their
Right.
way in their civilization. Some of the Anunnaki were very upset because they had done some earlier versions of genetic engineering for beings on the Earth using just DNA of what was existing on Earth, but the creatures they created could not reproduce, and it wasn't working. So it was, I guess, Inky,
Yeah.
who used her own DNA.
Well, Inke, well, and I forget, there was actually a female Anunnaki that did the work.
That's right, yeah,
Scientists-
because Inky was the
Yeah.
male.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the name of the female Anunnaki, but it was a female Anunnaki who actually used her own Anunnaki DNA and
Yeah.
spliced it with the hominid DNA.
That's go ahead.
And then she actually, instead of just growing it in a test tube or however they did it, she actually basically artificially inseminated herself, and she carried that first Homo sapien to term. She was pregnant, according to what I've seen in the interpretations. She carried it for 10 months and then birthed it herself, and that first Homo sapien was Adamu, who is Adam.
Yeah.
And then it was the male, her father or brother, whoever it was, that a lot of the Anunnaki were they viewed it as sacrilegious, and they viewed it as and all this stuff, and they wanted to destroy all of mankind.
Right.
And one of the reasons they wanted to destroy all of mankind is because in doing this, she actually made us too powerful. And some of the Anunnaki, not in that moment, but that because of the way we turned out with the Anunnaki DNA and other DNA, that they realized that we could eventually, not in that moment, but we could eventually become more powerful than the Anunnaki. And that scared them. And so what's interesting about that, which is that's in the translations, in the tablets that have been translated, that once she created us, that it made some of the other Anunnaki very uncomfortable, that they viewed it as sacrilegious, and that some of them realized that in time we would grow and evolve to become a more dominant or more evolved or more powerful species than them. They don't articulate in what ways, but just that was their fear. And what's interesting about that is, in context of what you mentioned about how, the creator of all things that exist above Anunnaki, the divine of the Anunnaki, eventually came with a prophet and said, no, this is a really good thing that you did,
Right.
and created us. And then now you're saying that these other alien species may want to create hybrids with us, and it could be because we are so unique and we are so powerful, and it was a good thing ultimately for the universe and the evolution of all life that we are here. The final thing, and so it's just interesting. It's just interesting to think about. And the final thing I'll say to that, which is interesting, is I think that the Anunnaki or somebody shortened our lifespans because they were scared of us. Because I think that because you and I both know that once you die, the higher self version of you, the consciousness eternal that's part of God, it lives on forever, and it can come and be reincarnated. But most of the time, even though there is the Akashic record and there is a lot of past life memory regression that we know of that we can talk about in a different episode, but for the most part, we forget when we come back as humans. We're born again.
Right.
We forget everything, and so I think that because when we were first created, like the Anunnaki, they lived for thousands and thousands of years, and we know from the the Sumerian king tablet or whatever it is that the Anunnakian kings, they ruled for 10, 20, 30, 50,000 years, thousands and thousands of years. So they had this crazy lifespan. But even Homo sapiens that lived on the earth at that time that they created, they would live for 800 years or 1,000 years. And I would say that if you're scared of a species that you created and what they could evolve to become, well, think about all of these concepts that you and I are talking about, and think of in you and I's short life. I'm 38. You are 70. So you've had 70 years on this earth. I've had 38 years, and for our handful of years, 70 and 38 years, we have accumulated all of this wisdom and knowledge that we're sitting here talking about today. Well, imagine what we could accumulate if you and I had 800 years. And I think that, there was a period of time where Homo sapiens did live that long, and something happened to where we don't really make it past 100. And I think that was a big safeguard that the Anunnaki put in.
Well, the chronicles of the Anunnaki in the translation do talk about that there's significant resistance to extending or having the Homo sapiens have a long life. When the first hybrid, if you will, I'll use that term, the birth of a child that came from the actual intercourse of an Anunnaki with a Homo sapien woman, went to Nibiru, their planet that is the 12th planet that Sitchin talks about. He was ordered not to eat or drink any of the food. And the reason why was it would give him the same lifespan that the Anunnaki had. And they did not want that to occur because, exactly like you're saying, they realized that then humans were the same as the Anunnaki. And the only difference was the lifespan. And again, in the biblical version of Eden, and not eating of the tree of life. And why? Because then you know good and evil, you know the truth of things and all. But that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But what wasn't partaken of was the tree of life. And so part of many spiritual paths is to obtain the fruit of the tree of life, which I always think is kind of interesting that it's apparently some kind of food or whatever that the Anunnaki use to extend their lives.
Interesting.
And their orbital span is 3,500 years. And supposedly they came back around 300 BC, 300 AD, and there was historically the events on the earth at that time that could be attributed to a passing body with great gravity. And I'll get into that later on, but it's not going to be back around. Some people think, oh, it's coming right now. Well, no, it's
another 1,000 years.
Another 1,000 years away. So, in by my simple calculations, but and I always kind of laugh because it was a female Anunnaki that did the DNA splicing and all. So is there a mother God? Oh yeah, there's Mother God right there. And the but just, and also what fascinated me was the fact this creator of all things actually sends manifest a being to come to Inke, and actually he went to the planet, he interacted with Inlay and others as well, and was around for quite a while and then just left. And but they all recognized who and what he was eventually. And but what does that tell you about
Was that the
creator?
prophet from the creator?
Yeah, but what does it tell you about the creator of all things? That he's actually very much aware of what's going on to the point that he will send manifest a being.
Yeah.
Here, here is your prophet or guide or teacher or whatever you want.
And that's why one of the many reasons I do truly believe that Jesus was the Son of God, because I believe in the validity of Jesus, just like I believe in the validity of the Buddha or even the Prophet Muhammad,
Sure.
or anybody who, I think that it's just like there's not one person for you romantically in the world, that it's all about place and time and energetically what is best for you. And I think that the Creator knows and sees when to send a prophet or an emissary, or to manifest somebody to help the people.
And and this emissary took a great deal of interest in interacting with Inke. I think that can happen and does happen on an individual basis of people who are seeking God and seeking guidance, trying to do the right path for them in their relationship with God. That sometimes that messenger may be through somebody you're doing business with, or a number of different sources that give you that piece of knowledge that you need at that moment to know where to go, what to do, how, or the rest of your life here. And it can be. I think I've been visited by angels, messengers, a number of times in my life, but not realizing all the time that they were angels. They're just people that suddenly were there in my life, and we get into a conversation, and here's the answer you're needing. And I think this is much more part of our reality than what people give credence to.
I definitely agree with that.
The one subject for another time, maybe.
Wait, start over. So there are. Say that again.
Talk about the concept of a hollow Earth, and this kind of goes along with alien beings and that are visiting the planet, and the concept of some of them may be from this planet. And I think that one of the things that is just now beginning to, or subjects that are just now getting to be addressed a little more in the mainstream, is that that the concept that there are, as the Zohar, which is the writings of the Kabbalah and the Jewish faith, talks about, there are 7 Earths. Well, and they generally think, well, that means 7 planets like Earth that God has created. Another way of looking at it is understanding that there are 7 levels of Earth, the surface being one level. And as you go into the Earth, there are different levels of places of habitation by beings and creatures that live in those levels. And starting with just under the sea. And then below that, there was a book that came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and I have to look it up because it's been a while, called The Hollow Earth. The short of it is that very few got shipped, and the printer, the publisher, actually had the books confiscated on the docks. there at their printing facilities. Is the short story. I had one of the books, and the short of that is it disappeared from my house, and there's been I believe a strong amount of effort put out trying to keep this quiet per se, but there are beings on this planet that cohabitate with us on this planet and have for many thousands of years. And I think some of the craft that we see is from them. And the reason why I bring it up is I think that as in the near future, we're not only going to have some much more full disclosure about aliens from other planets, but about the other beings, intelligent beings that live on this planet with us, that has been kept from us, acknowledging their existence for, or at least the mainstream of the public. And some of these beings are pretty well known, like the jinn in India or Middle East, where we get the word genie from, who have bodies of fire, smoke, and light, is the way it's put sometimes. But they can be visible, they can not be visible, and but they live, they die, they procreate, have children. They're just one example. And the Bible refers many times to heavenly creatures. And God has, and I mean God is the supreme being, God, has created a lot more intelligent beings than just man and woman. So, yeah. And we tend to dismiss that or not know about it or not acknowledge it. And I think, though, it's going to be much more in our face in just a few years here. You know,
I think the disclosure is rapidly coming for sure, especially with, I mean, just, you know, that we can definitely get on that subject another time. But obviously, I really, I think it's a subject we could definitely delve deeply into on one of our episodes, because it's one of the subjects that I've been the most fascinated with, and I feel that I'm currently probably one of the most well-versed subjects on, especially because I've consumed my fair share of content that about aliens that is at the end of the day highly speculative, you know, and very fantastical. But then I also really, for the past several years, have just been gravitating towards any and all content, books, interviews, you know, just events that I feel are highly corroborated, highly documented, and highly credible. And I feel like I have a very good amount of stuff to talk about there. But yeah, I think that just with the amount of seriousness that the entire Congress is taking towards it now, and you have senators like Mitch McConnell and Marco Rubio and a lot of other people, as well as former Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon, who are all really really clamoring for disclosure. And there are so many things. Like some people think that the government or the powers that be or the secret military industrial complex cabal of people that control the recovered craft and things like that. Some people believe so far as to say, like, Paul Hellyer is another one. If you know who Paul Hellyer is, he's the former defense minister of Canada.
Right.
And he
came right out and said it.
And he's since recently passed away. But Paul Hellyer, he basically represents the people that say that, all of our governments, especially the United States government, knows that there's like 9 or 11 different species of aliens visiting Earth, and quite a few of them we actually have deals with, and like these aliens have talked to officials in our government, and they're living among us, and they look like us, and we don't know. So that's what Paul Hellyer says. Now, obviously, that at the end of the day is what I would call speculative, because beyond Paul Hellyer and people like him saying that, there's really no evidence for that. I'm not saying that means it's not true. It's speculation at this point. Whereas you have people like Christopher Mellon or Mitch McConnell that, I think what is a more credible position to take currently. I think that it's really interesting to talk to absorb information that's very speculative, like what Paul Hellyer says, for example. But I think the better position to take today is to say we don't really know what our government knows. We don't, or maybe it's not even the government. Maybe again it's this secret cabal of private industry and government contractors that control most of the information. So we don't know if aliens are here and making deals and living among us, or if we've actually recovered, organic beings and we have dead aliens in a test tube somewhere, or if we know what star system or planet they come from or not, or it could just be that the government knows a lot more than they're telling us because they have. That's a fact. One thing that isn't, and this is what I'm saying. This is the most credible position I think in 2023 to take right now, is that it is a 100% certainty that our government has a substantial amount of evidence that most of them know about that is just behind the first veil of top secret classified that we don't have access to. And people like Christopher Mellon and Mitch McConnell have gone on camera and said, I can't show it to you, unfortunately, because it's classified, but just the classified stuff that I have seen, that they show me, that I try and inquire about, and they give me a big smoke screen, is substantially more impactful than what is currently being released to the public.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what we're on the precipice of. Like, I think even Christopher Mellon said it. He's like, I've seen photos and videos that are like close up, high definition, craft, like undeniable.
Yeah.
And he's said that. He obviously can't show the images still because they're still classified. But
there are times I know that there are things I want to share, but it's like a veil is drawn over, and I guess I'm just not supposed to.
yeah.
And interesting, but I'm just kind of observing myself, okay? But quick story that you reminded me of. Second wife and I are good friends. I won't use the guy's name, but I'll just call him JB. JB was with IBM when Apollo 10 had the explosion coming back from the moon. And NASA was trying to solve the problem of reentry, and there was a problem with the computers, and they were trying to fix it themselves. And they didn't want to have to go to the vendor, in this case IBM, to say, we can't do it, we need the vendor to do it, because they were NASA. They didn't want to admit this. It was JB that IBM brought in, and in 45 minutes he solved the problem. JB was, if not the best, one of the very best programmers, designers, and all that IBM had at that time. My wife of that time and I, he took us on a tour of NASA down here in Clear Lake, and we got to see a lot of areas that normally you don't get to get into and all like this. But we go into one of the buildings that we knew had a lot of computers, and this is when computers took up the whole floors, of buildings. This is back in the 70s. And big entry hall of this building, big lobby, and it takes us where we could look down this hallway. And this hallway had vertical board slats that came out from the wall, stick out like that, all the way down the hall. And it was a good 100 feet or more to the end of the hall, where there sat a guard at the table. He said, I can't take you in here, this area, but I want you to just stand right here and wait. Well, okay. He walks down and he goes in the door, and we're sitting around, and lobby's empty, and and this door opens up from these slats, and this little man walks out that is about 4 feet tall and has a suit on, hat, which was common in the 60s and still in the 70s, was a businessman's hat. And he was the ugliest looking little man you ever saw in your life, and definitely had an odd color about his complexion and all. And he walked with, I could have reached out and touched him. That was how close he walked by my wife and I. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, was that a gray alien? That was weird. And a couple of minutes later, Jim comes out the door. I walk over, she and I both walk over where this door was, and we could not find a crack or a seam for that door. And JB comes out of the door at the end of the hall, comes up, and first thing he says, did you see him? And we said, yeah. Was that? He said, I don't know. But there are 4 of them around here, and they can write circles around me on the programming, and nobody can do that. And Jim really was that good. He said, nobody can do this. He came out of this door over here, and we can't find the scene. He said, you won't. You won't find it. It's not there now. And and so how long have they been around and involved and all that? I think
that's crazy.
But it's I don't know why it chokes me up talking about it a little bit, but
it's incredible. I can feel it too. It's a profound story.
And but it's, I said, I don't know. They can write circles around me, and there's nobody that can do that.
And there's 4 guys that look just like that.
Yeah, all dressed the same, look just like that. And anyways, and they all dress the same, So anywho, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about, but it's out there.
Yeah.
You talk about leathery looking skin.
Yeah.
This guy had it. I mean, I don't know.
I wonder if it's bad prosthetic makeup they put on him. Bad 70s prosthetic makeup to cover up this gray alien
Well,
skin.
you'd think they put glasses on him or something, but he wasn't wearing glasses.
That's weird. But he had regular eyes?
Now, the eyes were regular eyes, but they were slightly larger than normal, but they certainly weren't gray alien eyes.
Again, it could have been. I wouldn't put it. I mean, just to entertain this. Not that I'm saying I believe it or disbelieve. I mean, I believe the story 100%. It's a very profound story. But just about like the entertaining. If they were grays, then like it could be because grays typically have big eyes and they're not white with color and black people. So it could easily have been they gave him just a little rubber makeup prosthetic, and that's why it looked leathery and not good. But gave him larger eyes, but still kind of lenses, kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
I don't know, but there were several instances like that.
I mean, and here's the thing about the Paul Hellyer stuff too. To your point, I don't doubt it. It's like I know that when I talk to people who are not inherently interested in this subject, which to me I'm like, how can you not be?
Yeah.
Because there's like my girlfriend who, I talk to her about a lot of this stuff, and a lot of what I talk to her about, because again, it's a topic I am so interested in, specifically about aliens, and I'm so well versed in, I could talk hours about it and about credible stuff, and I'm just like I've done already today. I'm good at being able to say this is interesting, but all speculation, and over here this is like concrete evidence.
Right.
But to me, what I tell people who are not interested in the subject is it's easily a sliding scale where it becomes more interesting. Like you have like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. I don't even find that interesting because it's all so heavily speculated that I'm like, there's not even anything legitimate. Whereas Paul Hellyer, like we just talked about, he's interesting because even though it's all speculation, he can't offer any evidence or even corroborated testimonial to back him up. He's corroborated enough just in his position. He was Canada's defense minister. He's not just some schmuck.
Right.
You know, so that in and of itself is very interesting. But anyway, what I tell people is it's easily a sliding scale, because on the one hand, you could talk about Commander David Fravor off the coast of San Diego in 2004 on the USS Nimitz in the Tic Tac case, and that's concrete 100% black and white.
Right.
And then you can have all of the, there's so many, and I'm not going to list them all, but I can name a dozen different incidents or events that are 100% black and white real. And if we just acknowledge, which it's not a leap of the imagination to do whatsoever, that these are all real, which they are, well then, okay, then that basically means that for sure there's aliens doing something. You know, we don't, that doesn't mean we know it. With the evidence that we've been given, it doesn't mean we know who they are, what they look like, where they come from, what they want, but we know that they're here displaying these capabilities. Well then, that's level one. That's like black and white evidence, heavily corroborated between multiple credible witnesses and radar and video confirmation. And then from there, you step towards credible witness testimony only. Like there's no radar or video footage, but there's multiple credible witnesses that all report the same thing. Mm-hmm. Then from there, you move to a singular credible witness. That's Paul Hellyer. And then from there, you move to the realm of complete speculation. But within that, it's like if you know that step one stuff that we talked about is undeniable black and white, then it's an easy stair-step progression to be like, look, I don't have enough evidence to say Paul Hellyer is for sure correct about aliens working in tandem with the government having some kind of deal. But I have to concede the possibility that it is a very real probability.
Yeah. And, you know, see, for me, like, God, now, have you had a personal experience with a UFO?
I have not. I've come very close to. Did I tell you about Scout's story, or did Scout tell you about the story? Here? At this house?
Yeah. All right, God, please let him have a personal experience with alien craft, and alien in a good way interaction.
No abductions, please, Lord. I would just love to see a craft in the distance.
I don't know. You might like probing. You never know. No. But God, please let him have his own. Because, see, this is where, because I have had many interactions with craft, there is no doubt. You know, kind of like the Tic Tac 2004. That's credible evidence, rock solid evidence to that pilot and everybody who has seen that film. They don't need any other evidence presented to them that this stuff is real.
Right.
Well, I haven't been that pilot, but I have been that pilot. I have had those interactions. Yeah. I know they're real. It really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
I agree.
And I've had those interactions with other people around me having the same interaction. And, you know, so, you know, it's...
You know, I wonder if to me, and I will say, and I appreciate you asking God for me to have a UFO sighting, a craft sighting, because I would love to have one. But for me, I actually don't need one. Like, you know, I'd be happy to have one. But what I mean by that is...
Oh, I know what you mean.
What I mean is I
anticipated you saying that.
I fully believe. You know, like I know for a fact, because of all of this very credible evidence in these events that I told you about, I can pretty much say with certainty, and I'd bet any amount of money that I had, that the craft are real, that the aliens that are piloting them are real, and that it's been happening for a very long time, that aliens have been coming here for a very, very long time. And I even believe the historical accounts of the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, and all that. I believe all of that stuff. So, like, I fully believe it. But I guess, you know, when I talk about convincing others, or accumulating a large body of very credible, undeniable evidence. It's not just something that I required to believe because I already believe, but I almost feel like, again, I was when I mentioned my girlfriend earlier, it's like my girlfriend's one of these people that when I talk to her about all this stuff, she doesn't think it's all nonsense, or she doesn't not believe. Like, I tell her all the things, I let her listen to the same podcasts or interviews or testimonials that account all of the pieces of evidence and how they all corroborate each other and they form an airtight case. And when she listens to those things, and I know of quite a few people like this, she says to me, I believe it. She says, I do believe it, and I do believe they're here, but I don't care. Like, this is a subject that doesn't interest me. How does this affect my day-to-day life? Like, I have no interest in delving further into this topic because while I do actually believe that they're here and this is happening, I don't see an impact on my life in any way. So I view it essentially as a waste of time. I don't really care about this subject. And to me, this goes back to our topic earlier about how a lot of these aliens are here to help us evolve religiously or spiritually, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because I do recognize the divinity of us as humans and the divine and all of us and the divinity of the universe and the divinity of these aliens, maybe that is why I am so obsessed with the phenomenon and the topic, because even though I already believe and I don't need one single additional shred of evidence to believe, maybe it's just so important to me to continue to collect all this credible evidence because for some reason I feel in my heart that it's important that everyone believes because it's important for our evolution as a species.
Bingo. Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah.
And you could have been quoting my wife. That Jean is in total alignment with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And she certainly believes, no problem. But how does that affect my life today? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I got to go to work. Thank you. Well, so do I. But I feel just like our topic earlier about Sitchin and the Anunnaki and the Anunnaki's spiritual beliefs. I think stuff like that needs to be out there in the mass consciousness and stop drawing the wrong conclusions about the Anunnaki.
To me, yeah, and my answer back, like, what does this matter? It's like, to me, it's everything. And maybe that's because you and I mean, I don't mean to sound egoic at this, but maybe it's like people like you and I get it because it's like, yeah, we both have to go to work too. We all have to go to work and chop wood and carry water and do our daily human routine. But you ask, what does this matter to me in my life? I mean, I think to us as a species, it matters. It's everything. It's everything because it's a concept of technology. Well, if you want to just talk about the technology, well, these craft are displaying capabilities that are completely in the face of what we understand the reality, the nature of physics to be. So first of all, we could just completely evolve our understanding of science, math, technology, and the universe just to be able to master the technology that they seem to be displaying. But then beyond that, like acknowledging that there is other intelligent life in the universe, and the universe is probably teeming with intelligent life, and what that means. And then to go further and to ask yourself the question that we've been probing this morning, what is the spiritual or religious beliefs of those entities, and what spiritual experiences of these entities that maybe are far older and wiser than us, what have they experienced, and how does that knowledge and understanding impact the human condition? Those are what could be more important?
Wouldn't you want to? You came across a race of people that were much more scientifically, technologically developed than you were. Wouldn't you eventually ask the question, not just show me this stuff, but how'd you come up with this?
Yeah.
How'd you develop to this point? What were your guiding beliefs that caused you to evolve to develop this technology in these ways? What's behind you, in your thinking that you would come up with this? I would want to know your spiritual beliefs because again, this is a interpretation. I think many folks that look at those of us who are investigating aliens, Anunnaki, Sitchin, blah, 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 as wanting to or say that there is no God, there's no religion or anything like that, and that's farthest from the truth, because I believe that just like the Anunnaki, coming to understanding that creating man, doing the DNA engineering on the sapiens that were there, hominids that were there, was part of the divine plan. It's not getting farther away. Science is not getting farther away from religion or spiritual beliefs. It's
unifying.
Unifying.
It's getting closer to it.
Very much so.
Exactly. And I was going to say, to your point, it's like even though we do want to know, all of us, and we do have scientists and mathematicians and physicists in our species that want to know, like, what's the calculation and what's the specific technical math and physics and science that gets you the craft that does
Right.
this. But more importantly, your point is, how did you as a species think about the nature of the universe to get there? And that's I think what most people that listen to Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson or even Nikola Tesla, that's the really impactful thing. It's like, yeah, you want to other physicists want to know what the math behind it is, and that is important, of course. But when you look at Nikola Tesla did not change our world as we know it from numbers and science alone. It was numbers and science, of course, but Nikola Tesla first completely changed the way he looked at the nature of reality in the universe.
Exactly. That's how he was able to do what he did
and
come
through
up with the thoughts that he did.
exactly.
And
So that's why it matters. That's why I would say to people even who don't deny the validity or the reality that aliens are here visiting us, but that don't show much interest, and they say, what does it matter to me? It's like, well, just think about what that means for how we perceive ourselves and each other within the universe, and what that means for life and divine spirit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I did have one thought I wrote down to say earlier about the hollow earth. You were saying about the hollow earth and the 7 earths, and we can talk about that later, which we will at a different episode. But two things. One is I was going to talk about how, I'm sure you've heard of it, and there's a lot of YouTube videos about this already, so we could probably refresh ourselves on the names and the data points and work them into our future conversation about it. But there's that famous Air Force pilot post-World War II that did a lot of the Antarctica flyover missions.
Oh, yeah.
And he saw that.
Bird.
Admiral Byrd or Commander
Right.
Byrd. Yeah. And he flew in and found the hollow earth
Right.
and all that stuff. So there's that story, which is really interesting. But also I was going to say, kind of tangential, but related to the topic of a hollow earth and like how it's, because a hollow earth might be physical third-dimensional reality just like we are, and there's under Antarctica and then under the ocean, like you were saying. But also, what came through to me when you said about the 7 earths and about how a lot of these other beings and have maybe live here and are from here that we see. I don't just think of the 7 earths as strata, like, oh, there's a hollow earth under the ocean.
Right.
I actually think of the 7 earths as maybe there's 7 earths, but it's different dimensional planes of reality. And so maybe some of these beings are from here and live here, but they live in a different dimension.
Oh,
And maybe they're interdimensional beings, because again, when you study the phenomenon, it's not just a phenomenon of technology. It's
it's our reality.
Yeah, it's not just a phenomenon of these craft displaying technological capabilities beyond our comprehension. It's like beings walking through walls and all other kinds of, very weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then craft just like popping in and out of different locations.
Right.
And it's really, it's when you start looking at those pieces of evidence, it becomes a lot easier to grasp the reality of those pieces of evidence through the lens of higher dimensional travel or interdimensional travel versus just conventional
Right.
third dimensional travel.
Right. And, some of the, no, I agree with you. And I don't know if it is indeed 7 levels on a physical 3-dimensional level, or if some of them are in slightly different dimensions than we are. But I think that without a doubt, there are dimensions that are coexisting in this same physical space with us that we do not see with our natural eyes. I think that there's things that have come out in the last couple of years that indicate that we can see them with the proper equipment, if you will. There's several examples that was done on the what is it called? The show of paranormal caught on tape, caught on camera,
Mm-hmm.
where holding up a piece of glass, the broken glass in the street, through the camera, they could see the ship over a building. Take the glass away, couldn't see the ship in the camera or the physical eye. But with this piece of glass, problem is, apparently it was a broken piece of glass on the street. Don't know what it was for or used for. But also there's multiple examples of cameras picking up and seeing craft that can't see with the naked eye. Some of the full spectrum cameras that are seeing beings, and some of the ghost hunter type expeditions where they're seeing individuals and creatures that just aren't there physically with the naked eye in normal spectrum, but in a full spectrum camera, they're very much there.
Yeah.
And, it's how much are we missing because we don't yet have the technology or of the mindset to be able to get into that altered state to see these beings that are around us all the time.
No, that's 100%. 100%. That's not surprising to me in the slightest. There is a really great UFO case, witness testimonial, where I think the tape is classified, so I don't think we can see the tape. I don't think that it's available to the public. But it was on an army base. I think it might have even been a nuclear facility. Because, it probably still happens today, but they don't talk about it as much because it's so new. They don't talk about it at all. But a lot of people who are now like retired, they talk more about all the nuclear sensitive, top secret nuclear facilities that were visited by UFOs in like the 70s and the 80s.
Yep.
It's easy to talk about those because they're 40, 50 years old now, 60 years old.
Right.
Whereas, if it's still happening today, it's maybe too sensitive to talk about it all. And maybe the service members that are seeing it are still active service members and they can't talk about it.
Right.
But anyway, there's this one case where I forget the particular base it was, but it was a high-ranking officer, one of the more commanding officers, a very credible, witness. And he said that it was at night, and they had cameras all around the facility. So he said that this particular witness was outside, and it was a craft encounter. He encountered a UFO craft, and it came down. It was hanging fairly low, 50, 60, 70 feet off the ground. Fairly good-sized craft, 50, 60, 70 feet in diameter. And it kind of hovered there for a while. And so this individual who's recanting his testimony, and he talks about, seeing the craft with his own 2 eyes firsthand. And there's I think several witness testimony like this where there was video evidence. And here's why I bring it up is in his testimonial when he's giving this interview, he's going in great detail about the craft that he's seeing with his own two eyes. And especially this craft is emitting, like a lot of them do, like this light. And the way he describes the light, like a lot of witnesses do with UFOs, is he was like, it was like nothing I'd ever seen in my life. You know, the color, he's like, it was kind of a yellow gold, but he's like, it was just so rich and vibrant. And yeah, I forget all of the descriptors he used in this moment in the interview, but he basically went into a lot of detail about how he just had never seen color like that. He'd never seen light like that. And it was just so fascinating to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he could see all this detail of the craft. And anyway, then he, you know, eventually I think maybe the craft takes off and he goes and runs into the little security center or whatever, where where all the security cameras in the facility, you know, go to. And there's a guy in there and they pull up the tape of one of the cameras in that area. And sure enough, the UFO is on the camera. And obviously that tape's classified. We haven't seen that tape. But the reason he brought it up in the story is because him and the guy that's sitting in the security center with all the cameras, they rewind it and they look at the footage of the UFO, and the UFO is on the footage. But the guy who witnessed it firsthand said it was so interesting because obviously every single detail of the UFO is burned forever into his mind, including the color of that light and some of the details on it. And they had these high definition cameras, and these cameras should have picked up all of the detail of the craft. But two things that he noticed were really interesting is on the camera, first of all, the light that the camera recorded was so different than the light that he observed with his own two eyes being emitted from the craft. And the second thing that was interesting is that even though everything else around the craft or on the base was very crystal clear, high definition, the craft was kind of blurry, and it wasn't like that when he viewed it with his own two eyes. So it was just, you know, it was an interesting case because what he observed with his own two eyes and what the camera picked up, it wasn't like they were night and day different, but they were different.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they can pick this up later on, but we have a lot we can discuss in days to come.
Yes.